The sunlight hit the polished surface of my desk, catching the edges of the sleek glass awards I'd carefully displayed over the past few years. I smoothed the silk sleeve of my cream blouse, the one I always wore when I needed to feel untouchable. My phone buzzed insistently, and I hesitated before picking it up. A calendar reminder popped up. Lunch with Donovan and Associates, 12:30 p.m. My stomach tightened, just for a fraction of a second. Donovan, the very firm that had rejected my first big idea 10 years ago, the project that everyone laughed at, the one that now literally dominated the industry standards. I leaned back in my chair, watching the city's skyline shimmer through the window. How ironic that the same people who dismissed me would now walk into my office expecting what? A struggling dreamer? I ran my fingers over the edge of a framed photo on my desk, my grandmother's smiling face, holding a simple handmade notebook, saying, "If they won't believe you, prove it quietly. Let them see later." Her words still echoed. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar mix of pride and anticipation. Part of me wanted to savor their shock. Another part simply wanted to move forward, untouched by their judgment. Either way, today was going to be interesting. 10 years ago, I was sitting in a cramped, fluorescent-lit conference room, the edges of my notebook frayed from endless revisions. I had poured every ounce of creativity, every sleepless night, every whispered hope into my project, a concept that, in my heart, would redefine the way people interacted with the tech we all took for granted. "Honestly, Samantha, this just isn't viable," one of the senior executives said, tapping his pen impatiently. The others nodded, smiles tight, expressions polite but final. My throat tightened. I wanted to scream, to shake them until they saw what I saw, but I only forced a nod, holding back the trembling of my hands. I remember gripping the edge of the table, nails digging into polished wood, as their words sank like a cold weight. "Maybe stick to smaller projects for now," another suggested, his tone casual, like tossing a crumb to a dog. My stomach churned with humiliation. Later that night, curled up on my small apartment sofa, I opened the notebook my grandmother had given me before I moved to the city. "This will be your secret," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "When the world doubts you, it's only because they can't see your vision yet. Keep working. Quietly. Fiercely." I traced the cover with my finger, feeling the embossed initials, and a fire ignited in me. I couldn't stop for rejection. I wouldn't. That moment, the sting of dismissal, became the catalyst. I would take their doubt and turn it into momentum, building something they couldn't ignore, something that wouldn't just succeed, it would set the standard. By the time I shut off my apartment lights that night, I had made a decision. I would never ask for their approval again. I would prove myself on my own terms. I rented a tiny studio apartment, the kind where the kitchen barely fit two people, and set up my makeshift lab in the corner. Every night, after long days at freelance gigs that barely paid the rent, I would open my grandmother's notebook and sketch, prototype, and tinker. The first few months were brutal. I faced endless errors, software crashes, and moments where I doubted my own vision. Some nights, I would wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, convinced the whole thing was foolish. Then I met Claire Donovan, no relation to the firm, just coincidence, but a mentor who would become my first believer. Claire had been in tech for decades, watched the industry's patterns, and recognized raw potential when she saw it. "Samantha," she said one evening over coffee, "the people who doubted you were blind. Don't ask them to open their eyes. Build it anyway. And when it works, make sure it speaks louder than their voices." With her guidance, I learned not only the technical skills I lacked, but the business acumen that would protect my idea from being stolen. I pitched to small investors cautiously, often downplaying my work in public, but refining it relentlessly in private. My first win came quietly. A small client signed on to beta test the project. The exhilaration was electric. My name wasn't in magazines yet, but in that tiny moment, I felt a spark of independence I had never known before. Months turned into years. The failures kept coming, vendors who didn't deliver, mentors who pulled away, software that refused to cooperate, but I never stopped. Each small victory became a brick in the foundation of what would later become the industry standard. My apartment walls were plastered with sticky notes, code printouts, and sketches, each one a testament to resilience. I kept my progress deliberately quiet. Social media was a minefield. Friends asked casually, "Still working on that project?" And I would smile, shrug, or offer vague answers. They didn't need to see the sleepless nights, the near burnouts, or the frantic calls to Claire at 2 a.m. They didn't need to see the first investor meeting that ended in applause, or the first major client whose approval meant I could finally hire help. By the time I signed the contract for my first real office space, a modest downtown loft with sunlight streaming through the windows, I had already built a team, refined my system, and quietly begun setting the framework for something the industry had never seen. And all the while, the firm that rejected me, they had no idea that their refusal had been the spark that lit a fire they would one day have to respect. The moment they walked into my office, I felt a quiet thrill. Donovan and Associates, the very people who had laughed off my ideas a decade ago, now stepping into a space I had meticulously curated. Warm sunlight spilled across polished oak floors. My walls displayed framed accolades, not the flashy kind, but proof of innovation and endurance. My desk bore a sleek prototype of the product they had once deemed impractical. Every detail in the room, from the minimalist art pieces to the books carefully stacked on the shelves, whispered a single truth: Samantha Hayes had arrived. They paused, taking it all in. A stiff smile here, a forced handshake there, but I could see it, the recognition dawning slowly, the disbelief that someone they dismissed had become a leader in the very industry they controlled. "Wow," one of them said finally, voice cracking slightly. This is impressive." I let my gaze linger on the polished surface of the desk, pretending to be absorbed in an email, letting the tension stretch a little longer. The irony tasted sweet. 10 years of quiet work, late nights, failure after failure, and here they were, expecting maybe humility, maybe desperation. They got none of it. I stood and walked slowly toward the prototype on display. "You might remember this," I said softly, my voice steady, "as the project you told me would never work." I tapped the sleek device, a subtle hum emanating from it, proof of functionality. This system is now adopted across multiple Fortune 500 companies. In fact, it's become the industry standard, the very benchmark you once dismissed. Their jaws tightened. A few exchanged quick, uneasy glances. We didn't realize," one began, but I raised a hand. "Please," I said with a calm, measured tone. "Don't try to explain. Just watch and understand." I gestured toward the digital board behind me, where charts, sales figures, and deployment maps unfolded, each number a testament to years of meticulous work. Their eyes widened as the scale became undeniable: revenue streams, global reach, and proprietary patents all clearly labeled. The disbelief was palpable. Then I smiled, a quiet, unyielding curve of satisfaction. "You refused my project. You doubted me. And now your clients, your competitors, and the market are all using the solution you once told me wouldn't work. I didn't just succeed despite you. I redefined what success looks like in this space." One of them finally swallowed, the color draining from his face. "Samantha, I held up a hand, letting the silence stretch, letting them absorb the truth. In that silence, I felt the culmination of 10 years. Every late night, every moment of doubt, every small victory that no one else witnessed, crystallize into undeniable power. For the first time, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. It was about closure, about proving, first to myself, and then to the world, that my vision was valid, brilliant, and unstoppable. I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of the room's silence settle around us. They were still staring, a mixture of shame, awe, and something I couldn't quite name. I allowed myself a small, controlled smile. The power had shifted. I held the cards now, not because I wanted revenge, but because I understood value, my work, my principles. "I'll make this simple," I said. If you want to collaborate, if you want to be part of this ecosystem moving forward, there are a few conditions. I let the words hang in the air, each one deliberate. First, respect. Not just me, but my team, my process, my vision. No shortcuts, no dismissals, no condescension. They nodded, hesitant, like students facing a teacher whose reputation precedes her. I continued. Second, transparency. You operate with integrity. If you're in, you're fully in. Half measures and hidden agendas will not be tolerated. One of them shifted nervously. And if we don't, then, I said, my tone soft but unwavering, you watch from the sidelines. That's fine. I've built this with or without your approval, and I'll continue to do so. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Finally, I addressed what mattered most. And last, growth. You must evolve. Old habits, toxic patterns, relying on the way things have always been, leave those behind. If you're not willing to improve, you're not welcome. This is about more than business. It's about doing better, being better. I watched as their faces shifted from panic to reflection, some swallowing hard, some silently taking notes in their minds. This wasn't punishment. It was an invitation, one I had earned the right to extend, one I had carefully designed with years of hard work and clarity. Then I leaned forward, resting my elbows lightly on the desk. I am not here to humiliate anyone. I am here to set the record straight and build the future. If you're willing to meet these conditions, we can all move forward. If not, I let the silence finish the sentence. That's fine too. There's room enough in this industry for innovation without nostalgia. Their initial defensiveness softened, replaced by cautious respect. Some nodded, some offered tentative agreements, and I could feel the room's energy shift subtly but unmistakably. I wasn't just asserting power. I was establishing boundaries, aligning actions with principles, and guiding them toward a better path, a path they had once mocked me for even imagining. I leaned back, watching them absorb every word, every glance, every unspoken command. This was the new reality. I was no longer the one begging for approval. I was the standard bearer, the innovator, and the one who dictated the terms of engagement. And it felt liberating. Weeks later, the changes became subtle but undeniable. Donovan and Associates had started implementing processes I suggested, showing genuine respect for my team and my methods. Some had even approached me privately, admitting they had learned more in a month under my guidance than in years of conventional practice. It was not about ego anymore. It was about growth, about seeing people rise to their potential when given the right framework. I sat at my desk one evening, the office quiet except for the soft hum of the HVAC. My fingers grazed the edges of my grandmother's notebook, the same one that had guided me through doubt and sleepless nights. I opened it and traced the embossed initials with a smile. Her words echoed in my mind again. If they won't believe you, prove it quietly. Let them see later. I thought of all the nights I had wrestled with self-doubt, the countless moments I wanted to quit, and the fierce determination that had kept me moving forward. I had not only proved them wrong, but I had also discovered something far greater: the strength, resilience, and clarity that come from trusting yourself when no one else will. Looking out the floor-to-ceiling windows, I saw the city bathed in golden light. Somewhere below, my project was making a difference in ways I hadn't imagined. People were innovating, adapting, improving, using what I had created to build their own successes. I felt pride, not just in the work itself, but in the journey, the struggle, and the lessons I had learned along the way. And in that quiet reflection, I realized I no longer needed validation. I no longer needed anyone's approval. I had become the person I needed to be: independent, confident, and unwavering. I placed the notebook back on the shelf and let a gentle smile cross my face. They refused my project, I whispered softly, and now it's the industry standard. My voice held no bitterness, only triumph and grace. It was a statement, a celebration, and a declaration all at once, the perfect note to close this chapter of my life.